Hello and welcome to the Desert Tiger Podcast. I am your host here on the DTP. My name, of course, is Colton G. And this week on the show here on Desert Tiger, I am joined by singer-songwriter Kim Churchill. Of course, before I go ahead and introduce Kim to you, the audience, I want to go ahead and thank you, the listeners of the podcast, for going ahead and checking out last week's episode, which featured reggae artist Exco Levi, as we spoke about his latest album, Narrative, as well as recently receiving the 2019 Black Business Professional and Association Harry Jerome Award for Entertainment. I want to go ahead and thank those of you who also shared that episode on your social media with your friends and family, and for those of you who sent some feedback about how much you loved the positive message that Exco is trying to spread around the world with his music. Kim Churchill has spent most of the last decade as a nomadic bard, a classically trained guitarist who decided to start out as a busker in his local region of Australia. Kim quickly took to the road, playing every town that would have him, no matter the distance. This mindset has allowed Kim to eventually progress onto the stage and into the studio, where suddenly the road wasn't the only thing calling, as sky and sea would yearn for his tales. After finally finding radio success, a change of pace was necessary, leading Kim to reflect inward and set his feet, but just for a moment. Just long enough to come back to the studio with a newfound drive, feeling lighter than ever before, knowing that he no longer needs to chase after the sun. Kim Churchill has recently embarked on a journey. He has started a project of 4 EPs. These 4 EPs, written and recorded in 4 separate countries, are all connected in a few different ways. Some of those ways you're going to hear today in my conversation with Kim. And the first of these EPs is entitled I Am. It was written and recorded in Berlin, Germany, with a hip-hop house producer called Vincent Camp. We're also going to speak with Kim all about working with a different style of producer than he's normally used to. Like I said earlier, Kim sort of wanted to change pace, and part of that was challenging himself by evolving his sound. And we're going to give you a taste of exactly where that evolution is taking Kim by playing you the first single off of this upcoming EP. And Kim Churchill wants to remind you that there's no need in chasing after the sun.
We've been chasing the sun for millions and millions of days now, and looking for things that don't like to be found. We've been chasing our dreams in millions and millions of ways now. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, oh, oh. We get home from work so tired with nothing to say now. I'm looking at you and you're looking at me. I can tell by your eyes that you're millions of miles away now. Run after the sun. The night is for dreaming. Why would we run? Another day will come, and all of this feeling soon will be done. Worlds are turning, days are coming. Oh my love, now why are we running after the sun? No need to run when the sun is coming. No need to run when the sun is coming. No need to run when the sun is coming. There are millions of lights that are so bright that we don't see the stars now. We wander around in an evanescent glow. All the these millions of lights are so bright that the nighttime is ours now. We get home so late that the sun is about to rise now. I'm looking at you, you're looking at me. I can tell by your eyes that you're millions of miles away now. Run after the sun. The night is for dreaming. Why would we run? Another day will come, and all of this feeling soon will be done. Worlds are turning, days are coming. Oh my love, now why are we running after the sun? No need to run when the sun is coming. No need to run when the sun is coming. No need to run when the sun is coming. No need to run when the sun is coming. No need to run when the sun is coming. No need to run when the sun is coming. No need to lie when your heart is hurting. Sometimes I try too hard to be something. No need to run when the sun is coming. No need to lie when your heart is hurting. Sometimes I try too hard to be something. Sometimes I try too hard to be something.
The Desert Tiger Podcast.
We are here with the nomadic bard, I guess I will call him, Kim Churchill. Thank you for joining me here on the Desert Tiger Podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure to have a world traveler such as yourself join us.
Cool.
I've already mentioned you're a bit of a nomad, but let's start on how we got there. Where does the love of music begin for Kim Churchill? When does a guitar find its ways into your fingers?
My mum, yeah, she's quite a musical lady, very creative person, and very early on, like just about the same time I was starting school, she kind of got a guitar and started getting some guitar lessons herself. And I'm not sure if the intention was always to sort of pass it on to me, but I sort of seemed to take an interest, and she would kind of basically give me the lesson she had just had. On a Wednesday afternoon, she would go and have her lesson, then she'd come home, and then she'd give me the lesson she had just had. And after about 6 months, I was sort of so into it that, you know, she couldn't really get her hands on the guitar very often. And so they got me guitar lessons pretty soon after that. And yeah, I mean, my parents have always been phenomenally supportive, but I mean, really, it's my mum who got me started in the first place as well.
That's kind of a very beautiful way where, like, she was passing it on as she was learning it, and then your passion for the instrument just sort of took over from there.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful kind of typical mum thing to do, isn't it? And like, I thought it was really cool that it was so immediate, you know. It was this nice little kind of, I guess it became like a little tradition of ours that we would undergo together each Wednesday, and yeah, quite a beautiful little story.
Okay, so from there, how do you transition to playing? What type of lessons did you end up taking? Was it just like a basic one? Was it like classical guitar? Yeah,
it was classical guitar. So after that, I started to show some interest, and immediately when I was getting lessons, I was sort of, you know, I was like Red Hot Chili Peppers and like sort of the Beatles and stuff that was sort of simple and, you know, that most people that were learning the guitar would learn. But then Dad sort of started to notice I was really into it, and he said, listen, I think you should start sitting classical guitar exams and getting classical guitar lessons. And his kind of deal was, he's like, I'll buy you an electric guitar if you take some classical guitar lessons. Yeah, he played his little role as well, so I started taking classical lessons, and then I sat classical guitar exams kind of one a year for about 10 years over the course of kind of growing up and going through high school. And then from there, I started falling in love with Bob Dylan and some songwriters that started really making me feel like I wanted to write songs. And also busking. I started busking, and I was playing this kind of bluesy, rootsy stuff on the streets. And, that was kind of how I sort of got my dream of being a sort of, professional musician up and running, was playing on the streets. And that's how I guess I transitioned out of classical music, because the kinds of things that were getting attention on the streets and helping me build crowds and kind of, have good busking sessions was playing harmonica and having a stomp box and a tambourine, sort of doing the bluesy, one-man bandy kind of thing. So I kind of went down that path from there.
How does one transition from a classical setting where you're doing exams and you're learning, like, the very basics, but you're also learning a lot of the keys and you're learning a lot of the actual, like, key parts of playing the instrument, to going to busking, to which, like, a lot of professional musicians may more so go towards, like, the symphony side of things. Busking's definitely a different path.
Yeah, well, Dad kind of wanted me to go to the conservatorium, and I thought about it because, like, it sounds ridiculous, but I have a kind of a competitive streak, and there was something nice about the structure of learning classical music and getting grades and trying to do well and practicing really hard so I could get, the best mark I could and that kind of thing. I enjoyed the structure of it, but I enjoyed performing a lot more, and there wasn't an enormous amount of opportunities. Like, at first I was playing classical guitar, I was kind of getting some gigs, in the corner of kind of wedding receptions and maybe like art exhibition openings and stuff like that. But in terms of, like, getting on little festival bills and playing pub gigs and stuff, I had to play the kind of music. And actually it's interesting because I was pretty happy to put down the classical music, because I didn't really love, as a musical lover, like, I didn't want to listen to classical guitar. I didn't really want to listen to classical music. So I was discovering music that I loved, and I was beginning to play music that meant a lot more to me than the classical music did. But, I was able to sort of, I guess, weave and work the knowledge and the classical understanding into the music I was making. And it's kind of going into the blues world as well. The blues music is one of the most simple sort of genres of music, I would say. So it was also kind of liberating, because everybody wanted me to do that, and I was able to do it very well, I think, because I had the classical background. So all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is so much easier than what I'm doing. Everybody loves it so much more. And, especially, like, Dad was kind of fine with me not going to the conservatorium once he saw, like, how successful I was being as a busker. I think that's all he really cared about, was, I want him to, be able to make a career out of this. And, once I sort of started coming home with these big bags of money, he was like, oh, okay, cool. I can't really argue with that. And he was really happy for me.
Well, I'm glad that he was willing to get behind your dreams, no matter where they led you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's a good fella.
All right. So was there a bit of a learning curve going, because saying that, like, you're playing in the corner of a wedding, like, there's not really much of a stage presence going on there, but once you're busking, for you to be using a stomp box plus playing guitar plus singing, you are the key focus of everybody's attention. So, like, what was the learning curve?
Yeah, it was really nerve-wracking at first, actually, because there's a certain playing as background music, it kind of just can be soul-destroying in a sense, because nobody really cares enormously, or at least they care, but they're not really paying attention to what you're doing. But in general, that gives you a lot of freedom to perform whatever the hell you want to perform, to play whatever you want to play, to extend songs, to shorten songs, to just, kind of do whatever you want. But then once you're performing and you have a large crowd of people that are very attentive on you, it becomes, a lot more, every moment is important, and every moment needs to be considered. And so the pressure of that, when I first started doing it, was really nerve-wracking. Like, I was probably 15 or 16 when I started doing my first kind of gigs, on the pub scene and busking and stuff, and especially the gigs in the pubs. Like, I would get so nervous, I would, like, sneak out to the car and drink beers that I'd had, like, an older friend buy me from the bottle shop, you know what I mean? Just so that I'd had a couple of beers and I was feeling a bit kind of loose and confident. But yeah, I mean, it ended up becoming quite simple and quite, it was just my dream. I was so determined to live out my dream that the challenge of becoming brave and being the center of attention was sort of, I got that out of the way pretty quickly, really, so that I could just get on with playing gigs and sort of following my dream.
Okay. So at what point do you start hitting the road, and was it your experience as a busker that allowed you to do so?
Yes, exactly. So when I first started busking, I come from a little town called Merimbula, which is about 6 hours south of Sydney, tiny place, sort of about 7,000 or 8,000 people. But there's a lot of small towns around Merimbula, and there's a real nice kind of little market scene. Everybody has markets. Every town will have a market, like every third Sunday or something, or every Saturday, or the first Saturday of every month, kind of thing. So I had about 5 or 6 different markets that I was able to get to in my local area where I was busking, and that basically that was going quite well, and Mum and Dad could see that. And I explained to Mum, actually, on the way back from Sydney, on the way back from my last classical guitar exam at the Sydney Conservatorium, I told Mum about my dream to basically buy a camper van and build a little home in it and just find as many of these markets as I could all over Australia. As I was telling her this story, we were driving past another city in Australia, Canberra, which was in between Merimbula and Sydney, and she pulled off the highway. It was awesome. She pulled off the highway, and we went into Canberra, and we looked in some car dealerships, and we bought a van. Mum went to the back and got a loan on my behalf, and we bought a van that afternoon and drove it back to Merimbula. And, I had to pay Mum and Dad off, and I busked nearly every day. For about 2 months, I would just busk everywhere. I was busking it with this guy that had a coffee van. He would let me plug in and busk with him. I was busking at an ice creamery in the main street. Anywhere that would have me, I was busking, and I paid Mum back, in a couple of months, and then I had the van. It was mine, and I hit the road from there. And I haven't been. I go back to Merimbula for a day or two. Really, I haven't been back for more than that in about 8 or 9 years since I left.
Wow. Okay. So your mom just continuing to drive that dream and show support, just pure love.
Yeah.
Just pure love. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was beautiful, and sort of the busking as well was a real pivotal way to, because I think what can quite often happen to artists in Australia is they might base themselves in a city somewhere, and they think, okay, I'll cut my teeth here in Melbourne, say. I'll cut my teeth in Melbourne, I'll build up a following, and once I've got my shit going on, I'll start touring. I don't necessarily think that's often a very good approach. I think it's better to be showing your face all over the place, all over the world, if you can be, and just establishing pockets of people that that you can travel to and play for. And so the busking allowed me to immediately begin covering an enormous amount of ground in terms of all the different places I was playing. So yeah, the whole busking thing and the whole leaving in my van and being able to live in my van, and I used to do crazy drives, man. I'd say yes to every gig I could get, and like I'd have a gig in somewhere near Merimbula, and then I'd play a gig in Byron Bay the next night, which is about a 14-hour drive or something, and I would just drive like 4 or 5 hours after the gig and then sleep on the side of the road and then drive the other 9 or 10 hours the next day and get there just in time to play. And that was all sort of facilitated by the busking sessions I was doing and the fact that I could make pretty good money that way and sort of support myself. So it all kind of led on from each other really, really neatly and well.
All right. So how do you transition from being on the road in a van and busking to making your way into an actual studio and recording?
Well, I got really lucky actually, because there's this fantastic, there's a festival called Byron Bay Blues and Roots Festival, and there's a very, very big festival. They'll have things like Bob Dylan and Paul Simon and Neil Young and things like that headline it. And they have like a busking competition that happens in Byron Bay in the week leading up to the festival. And I basically went in that competition and I won the competition, and the prize was you get a gig at Blues Fest. And so I did that gig, and that was kind of a big deal in a lot of ways. In Australia, that busking competition's quite a big deal. It's a cool thing to win, and from that I immediately kind of got enough attention from like the wider sort of music industry. one of the judges of that competition was the producer that made my first album. So that kind of fell into line, and one of the main guys that runs Blues sort of started to manage me, found me a booking agent, and then very quickly, in sort of several months after winning that competition, I moved into a very different phase of my career, which is we were starting to do ticketed shows, and we were getting festival offers, and everything became very structured very quickly, which was kind of ideal. I felt like I was ready to take that step. I'd done all the musical work. I was in a period where I really enjoyed being in the recording studio. I could just be in there all day making music. I was really full of passion and love for the process of recording, and I just really sunk my teeth into it all.
So, from getting into the first studio and recording with Sword and Shield, from there you actually end up getting signed to a label in Canada. So how does that opportunity come about?
Yeah, well, that was, I basically, once I was starting to get a bit more established in Australia, my manager was like, we need to get you to Canada, because he used to be a busker himself, and he had done some amazing sort of busking festivals and different bits and pieces in Canada, and he was really excited to get me there. And a few different things, like I sort of went to this big Folk Alliance conference thing they have in Memphis, and I met quite a few Canadian people there. And I basically just made enough contacts and did enough work so that we got me 4 or 5 gigs over a few months. So there wasn't much there, but we were like, we're going to fill it in with busking, and we're just going to kind of pretend we have a Canadian tour, even though there's really not many gigs booked. And I got over there and I started playing the few little festivals, the couple of festivals I had and a few little gigs I had, and quite immediately sort of started meeting people and getting more gigs. And it was actually a really full few months. I played an enormous amount of gigs in all kinds of random places. Like I did the bathtub racing festival in Nanaimo, all kinds of real funky, weird gigs. Anyway, at that sort of about halfway through my trip, I met a guy from a Quebecois punk band called Grimskunk, and he really liked what I did, and he organized a couple of gigs for me in Quebec, and he worked for the record label Indica. And yeah, I mean, that all happened quite quickly too. They saw me, they liked me, they booked me a couple of gigs, they brought the right people from the label to the gigs, and I think we were offered a deal. It might have been at the end of that few months I was there, and that was the first record deal I had signed, because I hadn't actually signed any deals in Australia. Quite a few people have given me advice to create sort of demand for yourself before signing your life away so you can get a much better deal. So I'd sort of waited in Australia. So yeah, it was the first record deal I ever signed was with Indica Records out of Montreal.
That's pretty impressive, and I mean, huge shout out to Grimskunk. I saw them back in 2014.
Yeah,
great group.
Nice.
I would absolutely love to have them on the show sometime. But that's another future. So once you sign to Indica, what's the movement forward from there?
So from there, I recorded my second album, which I recorded in Vancouver at Mushroom Studios. And I mean, basically from that point on, I began touring really heavily. By that time, we'd done a bunch of festivals. I came back the following summer and did, a lot of the bigger festivals, things like Montreal Jazz Festival and Festival d'Été, and maybe we'd done Winnipeg Folk Festival that year. Yeah, a huge amount of festivals over the summer. And then we sort of were able to book proper club shows and sell tickets and stuff like that. And then it was 3 or 4 years of really intense touring across Canada and across the US and across Australia. And I started to sort of plant the seeds I needed to in England and in Europe. And it was a brilliant time, but I really learned in that time, I guess, at the end of that really intense period of touring. I was probably 24, 25, and I'd really exhausted I was incredibly fatigued. I was sort of, I had 3 vans in one in Australia, one in North America, and one in Europe. And, I'd been kind of drifting for nearly 7 years. And yeah, and I was releasing albums, or I'm still releasing albums. I'm kind of still on that journey, but I had a break a few years ago and kind of broke it up.
Okay, so that being after Silence Win?
Exactly. So I recorded Silence Win, and that was a different album. That one had kind of a success that most of the success I've had as an artist has come through a lot of hard work and a lot of kind of determination. And I kind of like that in a way, because it's I mean, the moments of just going, oh, flipping heck, I can't believe that just happened. That's like a dream come true. They're not too regular. It's more like, okay, I've really, really worked hard, and I've had my sights set on this for a while, and I've done all the right things, and then it comes about, and it's like, wonderful. That's a bunch of hard work paid off, and I'm very grateful for it. And I understand why I'm grateful for it. And so when Silence Win came along, there was kind of all of a sudden there was this radio success to that album that I didn't understand. It had all of this success, and I couldn't quantify it. And radio stations that I thought were incredibly cool, like a lot cooler than I would ever be, were sort of playing songs, and I was like, God, I'm going to realize that I'm faking it or something, you know what I mean?
One day they're going to show up and knock on the door of the van and tell me that it's over.
Yeah, they're like, hey, Kim, you're actually not cool. We totally fucked this up. What were we thinking? And so that was a really exciting time. And as I said, like, it kind of, in hindsight, it was a bit confusing, and it made me kind of anxious, because I didn't understand why all of a sudden this particular, sort of little snippet of my music was, having so much success, and it made me anxious, because how do I do that again? You know what I mean? Like, what have I done in this situation that's so much better? I don't really understand what it is, but it must be something, because there's all of this. It really took my career to a new level, and that was wonderful, and that led to probably a good 2.5 years of really, really hard touring. There was a lot of radio play kind of across a lot of different countries, and there's a lot of places that I was playing gigs in, and I just wore myself down to the bone. I just traveled so much, and it really was trying to make the most of this kind of this confusing success that had happened with Silence Win, the album. And I kind of got to the end of that process, and that's when I had the break that I was talking about before, was at the end of the Silence Win kind of saga. And part of the reason as well for that was that in that time I'd recorded, I don't know, what seemed like a kind of a follow-up album. And I'd spent a lot of money, a lot of time. I had put a hell of a lot of work into the thing. And it took me, in the end, it took 18 months to complete, and that was while I was touring. Well, the first year of it was probably while I was touring. And then after about 18 months, I just couldn't get it right, and I knew I couldn't get it right, and so I threw the whole thing in the bin and started from scratch. And that led to about a year of not touring as much and sort of laying down roots a little bit. And God, I needed that year. In hindsight, it was even just throwing an album that you just worked on for 18 months of your life in the bin was quite an erratic decision. It was the decision of a fatigued, confused person.
Okay. Did that year allow you to reflect and grow and sort of understand the confusion that came from the success?
I think so, yeah. I think now the time I spent off the road, I made friends that had nothing to do with my music. I made friends that didn't give a crap whether I played music. They weren't interested. Well, they were interested, but like we hadn't become friends because I'd met them through playing music, which as an adult I had not really experienced. And it allowed me to just kind of, see some parts of the world that weren't in the music industry. And that's been really good for me. That's kind of helped me mature as a person and helped me find out a little bit more about myself, because as much as, my life is this kind of crazy journey, and it's constantly changing, constantly sort of moving to new incredible places. Touring and playing music for a living, kind of, you see a very specific part of the world, and you can kind of, in an odd way, you can be a bit sheltered from the realities of the world. So it was good for me to get off the road and just be a normal person in a city, just kind of meeting up with people and having a drink on the weekend, and then having quiet times in the week, and sort of settling into a bit of routine and kind of all of that. So that year off was kind of pivotal in the person I am now. I think as fantastic and phenomenal as traveling is, and it's not something that I'm going to give up anytime soon, you've got to stay grounded somehow. You know, you need those times of reflection and opportunities to sort of check in with yourself. And that for me was like so overdue that I needed a whole year of reflection time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it definitely came back with a good response, considering that you charted on the Australian Recording Industry Association with the album that you ended up releasing after that break.
Exactly. Yeah, it was an important time, and Wait Falls did chart, and that was nice. And that was obviously, the album. I wrote that in a week, actually, after I threw out the other albums. So it was quite hilarious to sort of run my record labels through that stressful rigmarole. But it charted, and it gave me another opportunity to tour the world. And, you know, probably a good 18 months of fantastic touring across North America and across Europe and across Australia. Yeah, it was a weird time, man. It was a weird time for me, but that album felt like the summit of a mountain had been reached, you know, in terms of really just continuing after, as I say, the sort of anxiety and sort of confusion of why Silence Wind had so much success, that I'm very grateful for it. It's allowed me to have a successful career in the music industry over the last 4 or 5 years, but it really threw me. Like I no longer understood my own worth, in a sense, and getting my head around that, it took a long time, and Wait Falls was the result of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, for someone who had been on the road from such a young age, and to be burning out at 24 or 25 and to suddenly find success, I could easily see how that'd be confusing, because you're still figuring out who you are as you're going through this.
I know. Yeah, it's, God, I've done some dumb shit. Oh, it's funny. I think we all probably say that to ourselves sometimes. But yeah, I really still am learning, and now I'm 28, so I feel like there's this nice thing that sort of happens around you, sort of 27, 28, where you start sort of settling into who you are. But yeah, I really, at the time, definitely hadn't figured myself out, and I don't think I really have yet, but it's kind of a gift of hindsight, you know. I'm like, oh, if only I knew to just relax at the time and just, you know, not sort of sow so much fear and anxiety into my music. Like, I'm sure I would have made a wonderful follow-up album to Silence Wind, but as it turned out, it took me 2.5 years to get my head around it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and sometimes it does take that, rightfully so, because you need to figure out who you are within that windfall, because suddenly you're being pushed to a much larger audience, and they want to know who you are, and they're starting to build their own idea of who you are.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's and the best way to learn who you are is to fuck up. Really, that's the quickest way to grow and to come to, you know, albeit kind of painful and difficult conclusions, or at least getting to those conclusions is painful and difficult, but really making mistakes is, for me anyway, I think that's how you discover who you are. So it's a mistake I'm very grateful for.
Well, if you can't learn from your mistakes, what's the point in making them, right? I, of course, definitely want to jump into the week-long process of recording Wait Falls, especially after throwing out an album you had been working on for over a year. But of course, before we go ahead and do that, I want to go and play the listeners of the Desert Tiger podcast one of the tracks off of your 2017 album, Wait Falls. But before I go ahead and do that, I just want to go ahead and ask the listeners of the Desert Tiger podcast if they have gone and copped themselves some sweet Desert Tiger merch, some DTP swag over at ilovedtp.com, that being ilovedtp.com, and that is because ilovedtp.com is the best place where you can support this show straight up. There is no middleman, there is no sponsor. There is no nothing else. It's just you getting yourself a t-shirt, and the hats are coming very soon. We're actually looking at about in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, the hats are going to be on the store ready for your purchasing delight. The tank tops are going to be following that very quickly, but of course you can go and head over to that store right now and grab yourself a sick traditional logo t-shirt. We have a ton of those available here on the store, and you can rep the DTP wherever you want to be in style. That is right. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to ilovedtp.com. Grab yourself some sweet Desert Tiger merch, because that goes straight back into this show, which then allows me to produce more content for you guys. It is a win-win friggin' situation, baby. That is so right. And maybe some of you guys are listening to this podcast while you're driving around in your car. Maybe it's not a car you bought brand new, but that's okay. Because you know what? Everybody once in their life has to have a reliable second-hand car.
Morning wanders in, taps on the window. Parked on the street in a side of town that I've never seen before. I stumble to the street, make a call on a payphone. Still half asleep, if you pick up now, then I'll probably come home. Suitcase, marry me, I'm addicted to no one. And a part of me is here, another part of me is gone. Like heaven in a cage, don't need a world that doesn't change. And did I stumble? I'm a little bit in pieces. Little bit in pieces. 'Cause all I got is a second-hand car and a letter from you and an old guitar. And I want to stay, but I move so fast. Got a picture of you and a second-hand car. I'm a little bit in pieces. Daylight switches off and I chose to be lonely. The words you wrote are echoing over everything I know. Seatbelt catches me like a friend in the unknown. A souvenir of a love I keep locked in my memory. Like heaven in a cage, don't need a world that doesn't change. And did I stumble? I'm a little bit in pieces. Little bit in pieces. 'Cause all I got is a second-hand car and a letter from you and an old guitar. And I want to stay, but I move so fast. Got a picture of you and a second-hand car. I'm a little bit in pieces. Every time I look ahead, every time I look ahead, high up on the past we shared. Anytime I look ahead, every time I look ahead, every time I look ahead, high up on the past we've had. Anytime I look ahead. Cause all I got is a second
the Desert Tiger Podcast.
So considering that you recorded Wait Falls in pretty much the course of a week, do you feel that you were able to capture the growth of that period in time? Do you feel like it represents that?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it was like it was a feeling of like, it's why I call it Wait Falls. It felt like an enormous amount of weight had just fallen away, and I was able to move properly. I was able to ascend to what I was wanting to ascend to very, very quickly, because all of a sudden there was a throwing out that album was an enormous cathartic moment of like, oh God, like had no idea how much this music was just confusing me and weighing me down. And so I was able to, it was almost like a kind of a slingshot, being held back for so long. It allowed me to just creatively just fling myself into the next album with such vigor. I mean, it was a crazy week. I was probably writing and recording sort of 16, 17 hours a day. But it was phenomenally exciting. It was very cathartic. And it felt, for the first time in a year or two, it really felt right. It really felt like I felt like I was back to understanding what was right. I felt like I had some answers in the palm of my hand for a moment there. And so I was able to do it very quickly.
All right, fantastic. And you've taken the momentum of that, and it's gotten you back onto the road. It's gotten you back into some various cities. So how has the, after kind of burning out for a bit there, how has getting back into the swing of things been for you?
It's been really good. Yeah, it's been really good. I find I can sort of flow a bit more now. I find I kind of go with the flow. Things don't work me up as much. Like, I got to this stage where flying made me very anxious. And part of that is like being on my own and having to move around about 100 kilos of equipment gets really stressful, especially when you're kind of put in situations where you don't know how to get from one place to the other with all of your stuff, and you have too much to move in one go. So flying would become a real, real challenge. And I was doing so much flying and so much traveling, I just hated it. I was so exhausted. I just would so desperately long to just be still and stop. And now it's great. I don't resist it as much, I just go through the challenges of traveling. Touring is quite a challenging thing to do. It leads you to a lot of situations where you don't have the normal things that people have to keep themselves comfortable and balanced. And these days I feel like I sort of flow through it with a bit more I sort of surrender to it a bit more and find that through a lack of resistance, the situations become much more manageable on a day-to-day basis, and from there, like, quite enjoyable, sort of have more time and more energy to give to all of the beautiful moments that happen. Even, just sitting on a plane and eating some shitty airport food could be a really enjoyable experience if it's kind of sort of done with the right kind of mindfulness and the right kind of appreciation for the simple process of having somebody bring you food and sitting down and making the most out of a little airport meal, and airplane meal. And so now I really love touring again. I'm really enjoying all of the travel. I just spent 3 weeks in South Africa. There's a lot of flying, there's a lot of traveling, but I had some great opportunities to go surfing, and I got a night off at a festival where I was able to hang out the next day and just really I camped in a tent there and really just immersed myself in the festival properly again, because most of the time these days I sort of drive in a van, play the gig, drive out, back at a hotel near the airport for an early flight to the next thing the next day sort of thing. So it was really cool to be able to stay in a tent and stay at the festival and appreciate it. And yeah, then I've flown over to London and having a fabulous time in London at the moment, and heading to Devon tomorrow to record some more music and looking for a surfboard, so I can get some waves. And I don't know, now touring to me has become kind of, the magic is back, and it's sort of come through just surrendering to the good and the bad that is inevitable in life no matter what you do, but it's present there in touring, maybe in more extreme amounts both, because you have these moments of such euphoria, such special moments. I can't believe we're doing this. I can't believe we're having this experience. And then you have moments where you're, sort of 38 hours into international flights and travel, and you're just fucking really, really struggling, and you exhausted, and you know the airline has just charged you an extra $1,000 in excess fees, and you feel really kind of drained and awful. So it's like allowing myself to flow through the joys and the struggles of touring, and sort of surrender to that process has really brought the magic back into it all.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that being on the road, there's definitely a lot that you can't control, especially when you're touring in so many different places. Like you said, you have vans in 3 different locations, and trying to manage not only like keeping alone, trying to keep 3 vans operational to stay on the road while communicating with just promoters and everything else. There's days where I can definitely see how that could be hard, but after taking a break, I can definitely see how also that could give you the appreciation for being able to experience these moments.
Exactly, yeah. And it really is about, it's about appreciating, you know, I mean, a lot of people look at the life of a touring musician and think, oh my God, you're living the dream, you know, how have you kind of cheated your way into this lifestyle? And it's true, there's so much to be appreciative of. There are some realities of touring that don't dawn on a lot of people, but at the same time, you know, a healthy appreciation for what is a very blessed lifestyle, a very, very fortunate opportunity that comes from a lot of privilege. It's important. Being in a position of privilege, it's fucking important that you appreciate it. So it's appreciation is really the key to flowing through it all in an enjoyable and you know, productive, good way. So yeah, my appreciation levels are just sky high at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, and definitely there's a lot of buskers who will never even get to experience touring the majority of their own country.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's true.
Something that you've started with the beginning of traveling again, and with the release of your upcoming EP, I Am, here on May 3rd, is sort of recording in a lot of these various different countries that you have built yourself in, that you have grown in, and that you have traveled through.
Exactly, yeah. It's a pretty wild new concept, but you know, I've recorded quite a few albums now. I've enjoyed the recording process and I've not enjoyed the recording process. I've sort of got my head around the inevitable differences between recording music and performing music on the stage. And I just began to realize that you know, I needed to find some new formats that would creatively kind of excite me. And what I had always done was travel, tour, pull up stops somewhere, spend a month or 6 weeks in a place where there was a recording studio and a producer, and make the music and then return to traveling. And what I began to realize was the way I write songs is normally I find myself as kind of a vessel, really, for an emotional kind of, like, the things that are around me and the way that I experience them emotionally, they're the feelings that I want to portray through my music. So I started to realize that what I really wanted to do was record during my travels. And so we came up with this idea of sort of doing 4 EPs that go together and having each one be recorded in a different location with a different producer and sort of travel around the world for a year. Kind of going to these places and recording this music. So I Am is the first of 4 EPs which will come out, and each one is a continuation of a phrase that will sort of, the phrase itself will be complete once the 4th EP comes out. And yeah, this first one was recorded with a sort of electronic house producer in Berlin last summer.
Okay, first off, I gotta say, I just got chills because I love when somebody puts that much thought into something, that, like, the titles of these albums are actually gonna all flow together, and that just makes me excited to find out what they're actually going to be. So, I mean, that gave me chills. And one question that I know that I definitely have on my mind is, you actually just brought up that Vincent Caught Camp, your recent producer for I Am, is a house producer, a hip-hop producer. So that's a little bit different from what you're used to. What did working with Vincent not only like bring to the studio, but to your music?
Well, we met in a co-writing session, actually. My publishers had organized some, so I do quite a lot of co-writing when I'm travel, just meet up with artists and write songs together. And he was an artist that, in the world of co-writing, the genre is not so important. You're just trying to get a good song. So I love being put with all kinds of artists and all kinds of producers, and so I ended up in a session with Vincent. Yes, it's kind of predominantly does sort of house music and hip-hop music, and we had such a good day. I loved the way he worked. I loved the character that he was. He's a really interesting guy. And at that time, it was right around the time that I was beginning to kind of come up with this 4 EP concept. And I was spurred on by my excitement at feeling as though I had actually found the first producer, the first location, and that was Vince in Berlin. He was so influential from the first day I met him in what I wanted to do. And interestingly, I didn't actually tell him what I was doing. I just organized some days for us to do some more music together. And, so he didn't even understand that we were potentially recording an EP or anything. He was just kind of psyched that, this Australian guy that he wrote a song with wanted to come back in. And we spent, I think we had I think we had 8 days all up. We had 8 days. And we began to realize we were very easily able to record an entire song in a day. And part of that was his style of production, because in the electronic and hip-hop world, that things move very quickly. He was quite shocked that I wanted to do so many vocal takes. He would think that 2 or 3 vocal takes would be enough, because they do so much. In those genres, especially now, there's so much treatment done to things that you don't have to sing in tune. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that's cool. They just fix that. Like, everybody expects the vocals to have a certain amount of auto-tune and kind of, treatment anyway. So you don't have to sing it really, really well. You just have to enjoy yourself a couple of times and move on. So that was really interesting. I'd be like, oh, no, I've got to sing that again, so I haven't got it right. And he'd be like, man, you've done it 5 times. I'd be like, bro, on other albums I would do like 30 vocal takes, more, So he worked really fast, and that was cool for me. Like, I kept it so creatively engaging. It was very easy to remain, in these really heightened states of creative flow. So there was that influence, which was really phenomenal. He was a bit of a master at the samples he used. He was very minimal with his sampling, and this sort of electronic element he added to most of the music on the EP is, it's very present, but it doesn't feel, you still feel like you're listening to, what's essentially sort of a folk artist. And that was partly his kind of, him picking some quite minimal arrangements, but also, he's just really tasty with the sounds he picked. He picked like really natural sounding cajuns or sort of, or beautiful sort of woody, earthy kick drums and things like that. And so it was fantastic for me, because I loved the idea of I listen to a lot of electronic music. I listen to quite a bit of hip-hop, and I don't really know how to incorporate that into my music, though. It feels like a sort of, if you're going to take an enormous genre change like that, you have to have sort of David Bowie levels of brilliance / dedication to the new style of music that you're moving into. And, I just didn't feel on my own as if I could take that step, really. I didn't feel confident to. So he allowed me to work and be inspired within different genres of music, but on my own terms and in a way that felt genuine to me and in a way that felt very me. So what we ended up with is this kind of very interesting mix of sort of singer-songwriter kind of folk music and like a German-style sort of house production.
Yeah, no, listening to the album earlier, you can definitely like hear the parts and how they complement the music, but they don't steal your attention, I guess I would say. Like, they aren't at the forefront, but like they're helping build the mood, especially like on Fallen Rainbows, building the energy up in that first minute of that song, where it just has like that low sound in the background, and it just builds this really beautiful.
Yeah, it's cool, huh? That's one of my favorite moments, actually, in terms of describing the musical kind of collaboration, because it's wonderful. It's just the song starts with just this gentle strumming acoustic guitar and kind of like a vocal. It's all about the lyric, and then all of a sudden you have this odd kind of hip-hop sound just coming up out of nowhere. So that for me is one of the most ideal examples of how it just somehow bloody works. It's a crazy thing, you know. I think part of it, to be honest, is the lack of pressure. He didn't understand that we were even potentially recording something that would be released. I was like, Wakefalls had come out so recently that I didn't have any huge. It was a bit of a risk, I guess. But I was also like, hey, if it's just a trip to Berlin and I made some music with this cool EDM producer and you know, got to experience Berlin in the middle of summer for a few weeks and flew home, like, it cost me a bit of money, but what a cool thing to have done. So there's a certain beauty to it that I think stems from just the lack of pressure and just two people being genuinely creative.
Well, it created a lot of beautiful emotion-driving moments, I must say.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
All right. One thing that you can definitely tell in I Am is that you try to capture the nature of Germany and Berlin, but Berlin is definitely like a very classic city with a lot of architecture. So how does one go about capturing the nature of a city that has been built and proven for so long?
Well, it's funny, actually. It sort of happened by accident. Like, if anything, I was planning for the Berlin EP to be very sort of industrial and very, you know, because I love the graffiti there. I love the kind of the way there's all these decrepit buildings just covered in graffiti that people are turning into, you know, warehouse clubs and you know, there's wild sort of parties happening, and I love all of that. So I was ready for a real kind of just bury myself in the city, really. And then we had a friend who offered to have us for the first week we were there, and she just happened to live in this house on the edge of this beautiful big forest. And so we started going into the forest with the recording equipment and the video camera and shooting all of this stuff. It was like very natural, and the birds were singing and the kind of the full swing of summer was, you know, just racing through the forest. It was beautiful. So we started to kind of create this. Creatively, we were looking at things in a way of kind of contrasting the beautiful natural experience that we'd had in the first week with the kind of gritty Berlin sort of streets in the second week, and so it became this wonderful kind of contrast between the two different weeks that we had and the two different experiences.
Okay, fantastic. I really enjoy how it just, you came there with an idea, but something else just came and made its way into, and it just couldn't be denied.
Exactly, yeah. It's just too beautiful. The forest was too beautiful. And the whole, I guess I can't get away from the fact that I seem to gravitate to natural areas. Because the whole 4EP thing, I mean, we're going to do a bunch of stuff in London while I'm here, which will give another sort of city element to what I'm doing. But yeah, the entire 4 EPs are kind of predominantly in these beautiful natural environments. Okay,
so you've mentioned that one of the EPs is you're currently working on in London here. What about the other two? Where are those being crafted? Have they been crafted already?
They have, yeah. So this is I'm about to set out and record the last one in the next few weeks. The other two, one was recorded in the Blue Mountains in Australia, which is a really stunning kind of mountain range, 2 or 3 hours inland from Sydney, and I just felt myself kind of gravitating to that part of the world. I just really wanted to go there and just create music. So that was kind of something I'd wanted to do for quite a few years and was able to do. And the other one was recorded in Canada, on Vancouver Island in a little town called Sydney, kind of just north of Victoria, near the ferries there. And yeah, it was recorded in this studio that was kind of right on the water and with the British Columbian rainforest kind of towering around us, and it was a beautiful experience as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely a good area to capture the idea of nature.
Yeah, absolutely. God, we had it in abundance there. And it was beautiful weather too. Like, it should have been getting cold, but last year it kind of stuck around a bit, the good weather, didn't it? So we really lucked out.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. And then with that in mind too, you've also got a bunch of places that you're going to be touring here in the near future. You just mentioned that you were in South Africa. There's going to be some UK dates, Germany, the Netherlands, France. We mentioned earlier that there's possibly going to be some Canadian dates being announced in the future. Is there anywhere else that Kim Churchill would like to take his message, his journey, and like to take in the culture at this point in his career?
I'd love to go and tour in Italy, to be honest. I'd love to tour Italy, and I'd love to do the Nordic countries a little bit more, Sweden and Norway and Denmark. Scotland as well. I haven't played in Scotland in quite a few years. And Ireland as well. And Brazil. I'd love to go to Brazil. So, yeah, there's plenty, to be honest. It's hard. It's hard to fit. It's nice to get back to a place probably once a year, and it's very hard to fit all the places you want to tour into a year. So yeah, if I can get to some of those new places, though, that'd be fantastic. I'd really enjoy it.
All right. Well, I'm sure that they would really enjoy it as well.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today, Kim, to speak about your career, its progression, and, of course, the new project that you have coming up.
Oh, you're welcome, man. Thank you so much. It was lovely to chat with you.
All right. Where can the listeners find out more about Kim Churchill if they want to?
I would go to www.kimchurchill.com. It's kind of the mothership of all info. Otherwise, social media platforms, quite active on Instagram. And, or just Google me.
Okay. All right, so one last question before I let you go. You mentioned earlier that right now you're looking for a surfboard to possibly go and hit some waves while you're in the UK. Obviously, as a Australian, a strong surfer background. Where are some of the best waves that you've found away from home?
The one I'm going to say is purely based on how it happened in the last couple of weeks, basically. But I went and surfed in Jeffreys Bay in South Africa, which is quite a famous surf break, but quite difficult to get to. And I managed to get there for the first time in my life, and I had an incredible time. And I would say, really, that's one of the best waves I've ever surfed. Is a place called Super Tubes in Jeffreys Bay. So yeah, that's my pick for now. Is South Africa, man. That's a great surfing destination.
All right. Well, hopefully you can find something in the UK that lives up.
Yeah, I doubt it, but here's hoping.
Well, at least, hopefully a good wave or two then.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not actually very picky when it comes to waves. I'm the eternal optimist, so I'm sure I'll find some good ways to keep me entertained.
Hey, man, being able to surf is always a privilege, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait for the album to drop. Like I said earlier, drops on May 3rd on all platforms. Go ahead, cop it for yourselves. Some great tracks on this album. Once again, thank you for joining me today, Kim.
Oh, thank you, Colter. Thank you for having me. And I'll see you sometime in this crazy life journey.
That is something that I am absolutely positive of as well. And part of that reason is because Kim recently announced some dates coming up in Canada for November. But of course, before then, this May 3rd, I Am officially drops on all platforms. If you are in Australia, you can hear it right now. If you are listening to this episode after the day that it releases, this album is available on all listening platforms: Spotify, Apple Music, Google Play Music, wherever you stream your music, wherever you buy your music. Get on out there, give Kim a follow, cop this album, and support fantastic music. And of course, before he gets to Canada as well, we spoke that Kim is going to be doing quite a bit of touring, and in the next 2 months he is going to be doing a lot of Europe. So here we go. Monday, May 13th, he's going to be in Munich. In Tuesday, May 14th, he's going to be in Dresden playing the Groove Station. Wednesday, May 15th, Berlin at Beta House. Amsterdam on the 17th at Bitterzoit. Hamburg on the 18th of May, followed up by Cologne on the 20th. Then he makes his way on over to Paris for May 21st. Then we head to Great Britain, where Manchester is going to be getting its taste of Kim Churchill on May 24th, followed by Bristol on the 25th, Nottingham on the 26th, London on the 28th, and then he is back to Australia for June. Sydney on the 7th, Fortitude Valley on June 8th, Melbourne, Australia on the 15th. The 21st, he's going to be in Adelaide, Perth on the 22nd. And of course, here are those Canadian dates for all you music lovers of the Great Maple Nation. On November the 1st, St. Catharines is going to be getting its taste of Kim Churchill as he brings these new EPs through town. Toronto, Ontario on the 2nd of November, followed by Hamilton, Ontario. Winnipeg is going to be on the 7th of November, followed by my hometown, my birthing place of Regina, Saskatchewan on the 8th of November. So you Regina people, get on out to that. My beautiful people in Saskatoon, Kim is going to be coming through your town on the 9th. Calgary on the 13th. Canmore, Alberta on the 14th. Sherwood Park was on the 12th. Sorry, I kind of skipped over that one. And then we have Victoria Island on the 16th and Vancouver on the 21st. Apparently, there's going to be a few more dates announced in that range to fill it up. So if your city was missed, go ahead and follow Kim Churchill on social media right now so that if he is coming through your town, you don't miss that announcement, because I know that I definitely don't want to myself. All right, I want to go ahead and thank the wonderful team at Strut Entertainment for helping put this interview together. As you guys know, I have been working with the team at Strut a little bit recently on some fantastic interviews, and we have some other amazing things coming your way very soon, courtesy of Melissa and her great team over there. I was hoping that I could make my way down to Canadian Music Week this week to meet with a bunch of Canadian music industry legends and great people, and one of those groups that I really wanted to meet was the Strut Entertainment Group. Unfortunately, that is not going to happen. One thing that they are helping out with, though, is next week's episode, because they went ahead and hooked me up with Jeff Burrows, the longtime drummer of the Tea Party. That's right, multi-platinum selling band in Canada and Australia, the freaking Tea Party, one of my personal top 3 Canadian bands of all time. I am so excited to have Jeff Burrows on this show next week as I speak with you. I also want to go ahead and thank you guys, the listeners here of the Desert Tiger Podcast, for your continued support. Those of you who leave reviews on iTunes, you don't know how much that actually helps this show chart. If you haven't left a review on iTunes, I would be absolutely ecstatic if you guys would go ahead and do that. And heck, I might even read your review of this show here live on this episode, give you a shout out as a big thank you to those of you who go and share these episodes on your social media, the ones that you enjoy. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so pleased. But there's some of you who go ahead and share every episode on your social media, and I am so ecstatic that I have die-hard people who support this show, who listen to it every single week, who are waiting to get their hands on the episode for their hearing pleasure. Thank you guys so much. And if you want to take that extra step, that one step further, of course, you can head on over to ilovedtp.com to support the show that much further. That helps me to get better equipment and to continue to bring you incredible interviews with incredibly talented musicians such as today's guest, Kim Churchill. All right, I want to get very, very serious for a moment. There's been a lot of things going on in the entertainment industry in Canada. Recently, the group Widmore had their van broken into twice during their West Coast tour. The first time nothing was stolen. The second time they were not so fortunate. So if you guys want to go and check out Widmore and possibly give them some support, they are an incredibly talented group that are making a ton of noise out of Calgary, Alberta, and they would appreciate any help that they could get. Another thing, and this one is much, much more serious, and you guys are like, yo, their van just got broken into twice. What's more serious than that? And actually, the first guest, the first person who allowed me into his home to interview him for this podcast, the first person to ever grace an episode of the DTP, hotshot Danny Duggan, was in an accident yesterday. That being May 1st, while he was on the road traveling for CWE's Decade of Dominance tour. Danny Duggan is in his... I don't even know what to say. All I know is reading the messages, I am so happy that everyone inside of that vehicle made it out alive. Danny, if you haven't heard what happened and you want to, head on over to the Canadian Wrestling Elite's Facebook page or their Twitter and read the post. Danny is incredibly lucky to still be alive, and the way I see it, he still has a lot of memories left to create, whether they continue to be in the wrestling industry or with his newborn daughter. So I am extremely happy for Danny that he gets to see his newborn daughter again and that she gets to maybe see her father in the ring sometime. My best wishes go out to Danny Duggan, and if any of you want to reach out and help Danny in his time of need, as he is an independent contractor and, well, we don't really get the benefits of a lot of other things. Danny could really, really use your help right now. Head on over to the Canadian Wrestling Elite website, their Facebook page, their Twitter. Before you even head to ilovedtp.com, fuck ilovedtp.com this week, and you head on over and you support Canadian Wrestling Elite in their time of need. All right, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Desert Tiger Podcast. Like I said, next week on the show, Jeff Burrows of the Tea Party is going to be joining me to talk all about their new single, The Black River.